question. So if you're interested in becoming a master gardener, we want you to follow through on that. We can help you with the process. You have to register though before March 10th, which is a date that I remember because that's my birthday. So this little card has all of the things that you can get online that are part of the South Dakota State University gardening section. So if you haven't done that, you can kind of go in there. And some of the things that are really good are the garden hour, and they record those so you can watch them online. You can sign up for the newsletter. There's a pest alert that Dr. Ball sends out. You can register for that. So if you want to become a master gardener, we really want you to join in the fun, right?
Yes.
And
We need new master gardeners, so there's new topics, and I'm not just talking about native plants all the time.
If you don't know what it is, what happens is you take, I think it's about 12 classes that are taught by different professors through SDSU. And you do have to take kind of open book tests on it. Most of the classes are going to be online. There's going to be a couple in-person classes that will be held here in Yankton. And then after that, you become a volunteer and you need to put in volunteer hours. And then you can teach classes. Or you can do a lot of things. You can help Kathy with the garden tour. We've got people that will go out to the community garden and answer questions. We've got, Anna, are you doing anything out with?
Boys and girls.
Troy Burn Association.
Yeah, there's all sorts of opportunities to volunteer. And if we don't have a group that's doing something that you're interested in doing, we'll develop that group. Cindy has the kids over the Boys and Girls Club. There's all sorts of things that we do. So if you want to be a volunteer, it's just really a fun group. Are we a fun group?
Yes.
Yeah.
Like herding cats.
And it's just a little clique of people that like to get their fingernails dirty, you know? There's nothing that nothing important about it that you have to do, just volunteer hours. And we all like that part of life where we're outside in the sunshine, getting dirty and watching something grow. And that's pretty much what we do.
Yeah.
Watch
people how to
things
garden.
grow. And so, and I also left a little garden journal on your seat. So hopefully that'll be helpful so you can kind of take notes of what you've done and remember when you planted those seedlings because you forgot exactly when you did it or when you put things in the ground. So that can be a real helpful tool. And it can be real helpful when you have one year after year and you go back and look and see what you did in prior years and how things worked out. Like the tomatoes that I grew last year, I'm not growing yet. So that should be kind of a handy tool. If you didn't pick up a brochure with our classes for the year, please stop and get one of those. I think we have an amazing slate of classes this year, but I kind of think that every year. But every year we kind of come up with new ideas that kind of help us. And as we're doing the presentations, we're learning more too. Did you learn something new this time?
They did.
There you go. So I'll let Coral take over, but we really want to encourage you to become one of us, our little group.
Yeah. Could use more volunteers.
Oh, you want to talk about the milk jugs?
Oh, yeah, we had some donations of milk jugs. Some people have been collecting them for us. So if you're interested in winter sowing your native plants, we do have milk jugs that you can take with you today. Otherwise, I can use them or we have people for other projects.
So my kids eat the cheese balls and they're clear.
Uh-huh.
Well, they were?
Yep,
Okay.
yep. Anything clear that you can poke holes in the top.
Okay.
Okay. So, today I'm going to talk about, I'm sorry, I skipped ahead. Oh, planting or plant selection and managing your native garden. I I wanted to dive deeper into this subject because it's not something that gets the attention that, oh, look at all these pretty flowers, or this is why you need to be using native garden or native plants in your garden. We talk about the why a lot, and the how, but not the really, we don't really get into details about plant selection. So I'm going to focus more on that today, and then we'll talk a little bit about managing or, design and managing your garden. So yeah, I just kind of introduced plant selection, garden design, and management is what we're going to cover. So we're talking about plant selection. We have 68 species of native grasses and forbs in our seed library, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot more out there. And so it's like, where do you start? Because there are so many options. And so you want to find out what's native to your area, if that's the important thing to you. We want to support pollinators, but in order to have a really great native garden, it's really good just to start with planting things that grow here. And so I'm just going to kind of walk you through my evolution and my story about how I started doing this. So I have gone out to the Tabor Rec area, and there is a fantastic little prairie out there. There's a less than a mile hiking trail around this prairie, and I just started IDing plants. And I used iNaturalist. It's an app on my phone, and you can take a picture, and it will identify that plant or get close to it, and another person will verify that that is the correct species. So they have experts that look at these things, and oftentimes they correct me. But I've identified, so all of these little dots on a map, most of those are for me. The red things are insects, those were not me. But yeah, most of those are plants, different species that I have identified. And so I'm using the Tabor Rec area basically as inspiration for my garden. Because you want to create a sense of space. You don't want to create like a tropical rainforest in your yard. That's going to look weird. And it doesn't really grow well here. So I recommend finding a prairie, finding pasture, going out on your property and wandering around and just start IDing plants. And then you'll get a sense of, these are the types of things that are going to grow here. One thing that is important is you want to grow things that are local to our ecoregion. So the EPA has identified these different ecoregions that are based on geology and your soils and the moisture and the climate and all of these things. And this is the ecoregion level 3. We are in the James River lowlands. I think that's the name of it. Northern glaciated plains. And then this is the northern glaciated plains, and this is right on the point where those two touch. So we kind of have two different areas. So once you've identified, and I'm kind of speaking to this particular area, but some of you might be from other areas. So look at your ecoregion, figure out where you're at, and then you can begin to select plants. So I'm going to jump over to my internet here. And there's this wonderful site, bplant.org, that you can go to, and you can, using a map, so if you go to this regions, this shows you those ecoregions, and you can click on the map for your area, and it's going to drill down into those ecoregions. And then you can get, if you don't have to, you can type in a plant name if you're curious about something that you're aware of and want to find out if it's local to you, or you can hit search and get 1,572 plants. Yeah, it's a lot. Or, you can go back to that search page and type in something like if you're interested in the liatris, you can go in there and type in liatris, and it will give you the liatris that are native to this particular ecoregion. So this is a good tool. Another tool I like to use is, if we go back to the slideshow, is it has an alphabetical, you can see here an alphabetical list of genuses. You click on that, you get the genus name, so Liatris would be one for a blazing star. And you would search through that alphabetic list, click on Liatris, and then you get a map for each Liatris that is native to the continental US. Or actually, I think they do Canada as well. So, and then you can look at each of these maps and look at, our little tiny corner of South Dakota and see if it's native to your county. If you want to be that specific. Now, you don't have to be. It's encouraged to plant plants that are, would grow within 200 miles of here, because that's kind of the spread. That's kind of the range where you want to collect seeds. But we do have a couple of plants in our seed library from Kansas, because Royal Catchfly is really pretty. And it'll grow here. So you can reach out beyond, but you're probably not going to want to grow something from the Rocky Mountains, because it's just not going to be good here. But if it's like a Great Plains species, sure, those will do fine. I am growing a sedge that grows in the Appalachians, and because they were selling it at a store I went to and I bought it because I have a problem. So you can grow things from other places, but again, if you want your native garden to thrive, you're going to have the best luck growing things that actually belong here. So these are some tools. Oh yeah, I nerded out a little bit and took the ecoregion and pasted it over the BONAP map so you can see exactly where Yankton County falls in which ecoregion, but you can just use that bee plant tool to find it, to click on the map to where you're at. So again, jumping back to, you want to create a sense of place with your native gardens. And there are a bunch of resources out there for the Great Plains. Like this is called Prairie Parkland. This is from pollinator.org. The Xerces Society has a guide. Who's this one? This is Xerces. This is National Wildlife Federation. Audubon has a list, so you can get a list of native plants that are good for this region for birds, if you're into the birds. And I have these up here with a QR code, so you can take a picture of them, the QR code, and it'll take you to the website. So if you don't have to write all this down. So those guys will get you started. Like, I know you can't read this, but this one starts with your native trees and it says Quercus. That's your genus. Well, this one doesn't drill down to species, so it just gives you a place to start. You can take that genus name, Quercus, and go to BONAP or that bee plant website and type that in and find out which of the oaks are native to here. The bur oak is the one that you'll find. So SDSU has a great page that lists a bunch of resources, and this is just a screenshot of their webpage. And I think I got that one on here too. So SDSU does have a native plant initiative, and it does have some good resources. They'll have plant sales. They've created brochures. So SDSU is a good place to get information as well. Okay, now there are more websites. So I'm trying to teach you how to kind of dive in and learn about these plants yourself, because everybody's going to have a little bit different taste, a little bit different needs. Your space that you're working in is going to be different. So there's not one resource that says, if you have a clay yard and it's in this climate, this is what you should grow. It doesn't exist. You got to do a little work on your own. So that's kind of what I'm talking about. But these are some of my favorite websites to go to. Prairie Moon Nursery. I'm not promoting them, but the website is great for picking plants. We're not allowed to promote things. Or businesses. But they have a filter on their webpage where you can go in and you can select dry, shade, South Dakota, and it'll narrow it down to plants that meet those criteria. Now, I'll warn you, when you search for plants for South Dakota, you're going to get plants for the entire state of South Dakota. So you're going to get stuff that grows off the Black Hills. And while this plant is really pretty, you probably can't see it that well, but you can look at it. This grows in Black Hills. This does not grow here. And so you have to be careful when you're looking at these websites that say this is native to South Dakota, you want to make sure that it's native to here, because certainly what's growing in the James River lowland is much different than what grows out in the Black Hills. So the Prairie Moon website does have a link to that phone app map for their species, so you don't have to go looking at another website. You can just click on the range map and get that information right there. So that's been a really good one. And also note that Prairie Moon Nursery is limited to their stock. So what they sell like 700 species of native plants, but they don't have them all, because as you saw in Bee Plant, there's 1,572 just for here. So Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center has a fantastic website that lists nationwide native species, and it's not limited to what they're selling because they're not a seed business. So Illinois Wildflower, Minnesota Wildflower, and then SDSU actually has a native plant database that is is not really, you can search it, but you have to know the scientific name, so it's a little more difficult to use. Actually, that brings me to a point. It's really a good idea when you're trying to research and delve into plants to use the scientific name, because common names are different. There can be multiple common names for a species. For example, Liatris aspera is a common name of button blazing star, button gay feather, rough blazing star, or rough gay feather. So you could see these common names, but they're all referencing one plant, one type of plant. So if you have a common name, first thing you do, go Google the scientific name for it, and then do the rest of your searches using that scientific name. It's gonna make your life easier. And eventually you'll memorize them all. And your brain will be full. Okay, so I've talked about the tools, the places where you can go to learn about the native plants that you find interesting or wanted to research. So now we're gonna talk a little bit about picking the right plants for your native garden. And we all know that we need to consider the soil moisture, the soil type, your light availability, the slope and aspect. I mean, these are all things we all think about when selecting plants or thinking about the place we're planting in, and then thinking about which plants we can select for those. Yes.
Do you have to have special permission to plant on the section between the sidewalk and the street?
No.
Oh,
Not, in Yankton, our rules are kind of loose, which is great, because if you've seen my yard, I don't follow rules. I think there might be a height restriction, but that might just be for the corners, which I think was in 4 feet or something like that. But otherwise, I kind of get away with, so far, I planted whatever I wanted, Diana too. I'm working on a planting at a neighbor's house, and it was looking a little weedy because it's in its first year or second year. And it's had some weedy looking asters in it. So the weed cops were called, and so I dealt with them, and the guy was fantastic. He was like, what's this plant? What's this? And just asking me all kinds of questions. And he was more interested in being educated on the topic than telling me, no, you can't do that. So that was really great. So city contacts you because you have weeds, native plants in your boulevard, just tell them they're native plants and you're pretty well good to go. So yeah, that last picture was a picture of my boulevard. Okay, so back to plant selection. Other considerations are the size, height, and spacing of those plants. Spacing is not so important when we're talking native garden design, because, and we'll go into that in a minute, but you're gonna really pack the plants in into your native garden. I think I mentioned water and drainage, bloom, color, and time. I mean, probably everybody thinks about that. We all consider that. And then USDA hardiness zones. So those are kind of the common things you think about. But other things that you might want to think about are the reproductive habitat or habit of the plant. Does it spread by rhizomes? Is it aggressive cedar? How is that plant gonna behave reproductively in the space that I'm planting it in? So there's like well-behaved clumpers, like grasses, most of them. Some of them spread through rhizomes, but some of them are nice clumpers that stay put. And then there are other, like this conchylium, it spreads very quickly. And so if you don't want something aggressive, those are the kinds of things you have to look for when you're researching these plants, is information about the reproductive habit of the plant. Another thing to consider is lifespan. So not everything that we have in our seed library is a perennial. We actually do have some annuals and biennials. And so things like your Rudbeckia hirta and a Gaillardia, those plants are annuals or biennials. They behave where they'll grow one season and then the next season they'll flower, or they'll flower in one season and then they disappear. And you might think they're perennials because they self-seed and they grow new ones, but they're actually not. So you want to take that lifespan into consideration, because if you want to keep Gaillardia in your native garden, you're going to have to make sure it has the space to self-sow, to reseed itself, and that it's not getting crowded out by other stuff. So, and maybe, and you know, these annual species are a really great thing to plant when you're establishing your garden, because they do kind of cover the ground plane. They do fill up the space temporarily until your longer lived plants can fill in. So they do have a role, and maybe you want to use them in that manner, and you do want them to disappear from the landscape after some time, or out of your landscaping after a time. But just know that if you pick an annual, you're going to have to keep seeding it if you want it to stay. And this kind of feeds into lifespan, but you want to consider a plant's management need. And this one, this cardinal flower, it says here that parent plants will not persist for more than a few years, but they are prolific self-seeders. So these are considered a perennial, but they don't live very long. And so if you wanted to keep these short-lived, not necessarily annuals, but these short-lived plants in your landscape, the penstemons are the same. They're short-lived. You'll want to make sure that they have the space to self-seed. And you know, native gardens, they're not meant to be like maintained and kept in this static mode. So things move around and shift, and that's the beauty of it. So just know the management needs of a plant. Other things to think about as far as management needs are, you know, are you going to need to chop the plant back because you've selected a species that's too tall? So there's a management practice called the Chelsea chop, where you can actually chop stuff down in June so that it's shorter, so that it doesn't grow 6 feet tall in a boulevard planting. And lots of species respond well to that. I'll talk a little bit more about that, but just keep the management in mind. Root zone. You want to understand the root structure of the plants you're planting together, because this kind of relates to the sociability of the plants that are in your planting. They each are going to occupy a different zone of the soil profile. So a taproot's going to go really deep into the soil profile. The fibrous roots are going to spread out horizontally more versus the taproot that's going to go down vertically. And you can see how these could work nicely together in a garden, because if you have a taprooted plant planted next to a fibrous, then the taproot's going down and this fibrous root has space to spread, but they're not gonna outcompete each other because they're occupying different zones of the soil profile. So, I mean, if you get a whole bunch of plants that are all fibrous rooted, they're all gonna be competing, which is fine if that's what you're going for. And that's okay to do. But if you want to get a really dense planting, it's good to stick those tap-rooted things in between the fibrous rooted plants, as well as corms, bulbs, and tubers. Those are also good ones to kind of stick in between the fibrous rooted plants, because those kind of, they will expand eventually, but they do kind of occupy one space in the soil profile. And like Liatris, the Liatris has corms, the wild onions have bulbs. So we have different kinds. We we do have seeds in our seed library representing these different root types. And then there's rhizomes, and these guys, they're most, not all, are quite aggressive. So they'll spread underground and just spread out and take over the world if you let them. Like, don't plant common milkweed in your yard. You can plant it in your pasture, or in your field, but these things spread like rhizomes, spread through rhizomes, and they pop up all over your garden, and they're just hard to control. A lot of the goldenrod species spread by rhizomes, so where they just grow out and the plant pops up. We don't have those ones in our seed library for that very reason, because they are so aggressive, and those belong out in the prairie and not in our yards. So, if you do have a rhizomatous plant that you really find fascinating and you have to have it in your yard, plant it with another really aggressive rhizomatous plant, because they'll compete with each other for that space, and it'll keep them a little more well paved. So there's a lot to think about. So we kind of talked about the reproductive, the lifespan management needs for its own. And then another thing you want to think about is the root or the growth habit of your plants. Like, is it a single stem that's going to come up from a core? You can plant a ton of liatris. I talk about liatris a lot because I love them. You can plant a ton of those because they're just one individual stem, and they can be popping up all over your garden. Are they sprawling like the wild strawberries that are going to cover your ground plane and be like a green mulch layer? Are they kind of a bushy where they just kind of spread out and go everywhere? Or are they a nice little clumper that kind of grows this bunch out from a central basal rosette? So these all occupy different layers of, I guess, your above ground plane. So you can nestle, these spiky individual stems, have them coming up through your bunching, or your bushy type plants, or obviously you can have all the ground cover sprawling plants you want underneath all of your other plants. So those are other things that you may want to know about plants before you start designing your garden. Questions? I just talked about a lot, so. Huh?
Or you can do it all.
Or you can do it all wrong. Yes, Diana and I have lots of practice at that. So you might be wondering, you're like, this is way too much. I guarantee you it is way too much, and I knew none of this when I first started. I went on Prairie Moon website, and I kid you not, I put in South Dakota, I put in dry, and I picked every plant and grabbed one of everything, and then I just grew them all in milk jugs and started plugging them into the ground. And boy, did I have a nightmare. So, and I tried, and I was helping Diana. She did a better job than I did. But we're still learning. And so these are the things that I have learned, the lesson learned. I learned my lesson. I'm sharing it with you. Don't repeat my mistakes. Especially if you're trying to do something in a city, in a front yard, you want to be really mindful of these gardens because you want them to look pretty. You don't want the weed cops called on you. If you live in the country, you can do whatever you want. There are no rules. And if you like the wild prairie look, hey, go for it. I do. I have a part of my garden that is very manicured, but it's native plants. And then I have this wild area. That's my boulevard. So I'm doing kind of a little bit of both. So if this seems like too much, it's not if you're trying to make something pretty in town in your front yard. I've heard somebody talk about the mullet style gardening where it's like all clean and tidy in the front and party in the back. So you do the pretty tidy gardens in your front yard and then do the wilder stuff in your backyard. I'm doing just the opposite. I don't like rules. So, all right. So I've talked about kind of the in-depth things. Now I just want to review for designing your native garden. You want to diversify your plantings. So you want a mix of grasses and forbs. About 30% 30, 70. So 30% grasses, 70% forests. Your grasses, yeah, your grasses act as your ground cover, a forb is a flower.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. And you want continuous bloom succession, so you want things blooming in every season, probably no more than 3. If you're going for a while, they'll look fine, but if you're trying to stay tidy, do 1 to 3 species in each of the blooming periods. You want to do a variety of colors because those will attract different insects. I tried to find a meme where it shows like the different colors that different insects see, but I couldn't find it. And I'm not sure that's true anyway, because they'll just find what they want. You do want to plant a variety of flower shapes, and this is important for, the different insects, and then like, say you like hummingbirds, well, then you want to plant tubular shaped flowers, because that's what they prefer. Say you just like birds, well, then you want to plant cone flowers, because they like to eat the seeds. So, a variety of flower shapes will attract a variety of pollinators. So throw in some legumes, because they fix nitrogen, and that's good. And there's lots of legumes in the seed library, the prairie clovers and the round-headed bush clover, and so we have those. And then you can go even further and pick things based on seasonal interest. So there's interesting seed, and I guess what I mean by that is winter interest. I should have called it winter interest, because you want it to look good in the winter too. And there are lots of grasses that have good color for the winter. The seed heads, like these cone flower seed heads, are gorgeous in the winter, and they're cute when they get the snow on top. And they also feed birds. There are things that have colored stems that stay put. In the fall, there's a lot of things that have foliage that turns orange and red, so you have pretty fall color from a bunch of plants. So those are some other things. So these are more things to think about after you've thought about all those other things. So you have to think about all those other things first, and once you know all those things about the plants, then you can pick the plants based on these. Then you can pick your 3 bloomers for each season and pick your variety of color. But do those other things first. Don't start with this, because this is what I did. Bad idea. Okay, so planting your garden. This isn't your typical landscape that I'm talking about. To have a successful native garden, you kind of want to mimic nature, because these plants are used to competing. They're used to being grown in close quarters, in terrible conditions, and in terrible soils. They're not used to rich loam that has been fertilized for 20 years. That's what I'm up against. My yard is almost too fertile. Everything is on crack in my yard. But go down to my friend Diana's place, and she has the worst clay in the world, and her plants behave. So we're not creating a garden where you're putting one plant here and mulching around it, and putting another one here and mulching around it. You are essentially recreating a prairie. So this is a picture of a little corner of my yard, which has since been destroyed. And this is the early planting, and you can kind of see where the individual plants are, and they're pretty close together. And this is what it looks like now. And I wish I had a picture when the stuff was blooming, but this was kind of just when everything was greening up. But you can see how the whole place is really just filled in. There's a little open spot. I needed more plants there. But that's kind of what we're going for, because you want to cover the ground plane, because then you're not going to have to mulch and do all that maintenance stuff that you would normally have to do. So you're going to use the matrix design, and I will talk about that more. You want to plant your plants in repeated masses, so groupings of odd numbers, 3, 5, 7, 11. And I think I mentioned the bloom period. You're going to plant your plants about 12 inches apart. It doesn't matter what the seed packet says, what the plant says. Plant your plants about 12 inches apart. If you have something really big like an indigo, a baptisia, that will get big and they're kind of like a book, you can give them more space. But any of the smaller plants, just pack them in. Again, the plant placement comes into play when you're thinking about that root structure and the growth habit. You don't want to plant all of your single stems in one spot, then you just have a spot with all single stems. You want to plant them with the bushy things so they come up through the bushy things. So think about that. And then I guess one thing, I said no mulch, but you can use mulch when you're establishing your garden, just in the beginning. So here's a graphic of that matrix design where they talk about the ground cover layer, which would be your grasses or your strawberries, anything that occupies the ground plane. And then here's your seasonal theme layer or your forbs and flowers. And then there is a structural element to this, which could be a shrub, a taller structural native plant, like a Culver's root is a great one because it gets pretty tall and it's a spike. Your structure could be a statue or a bird bath or anything like that. But mostly consider your ground cover layer and your seasonal theme layer. That's what I'm mostly focusing on today. So here is a graphic that I took from Prairie Up by Benjamin Mote. I loaned my book out, so I had to make a printout of it. Fantastic book. In fact, most of what I'm talking about today is because of that book. And he's giving a webinar in 2 days about this. So if you want to learn from a professional, you could go check that out. This is kind of a graphic of the design of a matrix layer. And so this is the final planting. Well, it's not the final. It's what he does is takes a 10 by 10 foot grid, so it's 100 square feet, right? And uses it to design. So he starts with the matrix layer, the ground cover layer, with Bouteloua gracilis, which is blue grama, and it's a small bunch grass that maybe gets a foot tall. We have it in the seed library. And you can see that he plants it 12 inches apart. Then he adds in the fall or the spring blooming plants, and he only has 2 in here, the columbine and the alumbrut or heuchera. And he's got a couple bunches, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3. So and then you're gonna add your next layer, which is your summer.
I think you clicked it.
I don't know how to go back.
Oh, at the back.
I don't have a back arrow. Okay.
There.
Get it?
You gotta go back
Oh,
again.
back.
There you go.
Okay.
That's it.
No, this is the one I was on. Okay, so you add in your spring bloomers, and then you go to your summer layer, which has got the cone flowers, the allium, prairie onion, and the liatris. And you can see how the alliums, he's got 5 in a bunch because those are really small. Those are short and they are spikes, so there's fewer of them in a bunch. Whereas he's got, the 3 of the echinacea, which they're a bunch, but they kind of clump out a little more. Then you add in your fall bloomers, and you can see that there's only one of the aromatic aster. That's for a reason. Most of the aster species, they get pretty tall and they kind of tree out, if you will, and they occupy a lot of the above ground space. So a lot of times you really only need one. Plus they're prolific self-seeders, so you don't need as many of them. Yeah. Plus, I mean, they just get huge and they're covered with flowers. And the solidago, the goldenrod, don't have a ton of those in there either because they can be a little aggressive. But they can also act as a structural plant because they get tall and there's kind of a plume on top. So they're really, really pretty. So then after you've completed this design, which is this, if you want to cover more than 100 square feet, then you just take this matrix that you created and you flip it around. You can see how we flipped it by the triangles being pointed in different directions. And by just shifting it makes it so it's not uniform, but you still have kind of this balance going on because the patterns are repeating. And that's what you want to do. You want repeating patterns, but they're not exactly in the same order. They're shifted around a little bit. But this is a good place to start when you're thinking about design of a native garden. Questions? No, oh gosh, this is too much. That's the point. If this is too much, you can cheat and go to places like this resource. I should have put this on here, but it is on the bottom of the page. It's BWSR, which I can't remember what that stands for, but it's from the state of Minnesota. It's a fantastic resource, and they have this garden plan that gives you each of the plants and then how they're laid out. And there's other, did you want me to go back? I'll put the slide up when I'm done, and you can come up here and look at the name.
As a reminder, it will be
Online, yeah.
too.
Yeah.
You will be able to go to YouTube and find the whole presentation.
Yes, you can watch the presentation, or you can get a printout of it. So these will be in there. But wildones.org, great organization. There's a chapter in Sioux City I belong to. They have garden plans. Landscape Interactions is another place that has shared some plans. And the grownative.org, which is out of Missouri, has native plans. And these ones are more accessible. Oh, another one is Blazing Star Gardens. They're a nursery in Minnesota. They also share plans. And so those are a good place to start. But keep in mind, what's native in Minnesota might not be native here. But they might have a Liatris that's native in Minnesota. We can use that same garden design and substitute a Liatris that's native here. So you don't have to use the plants they're suggesting, but use their design to help guide you instead of trying to do your own design if that seems too overwhelming. Or just go buy plants and stick them in the ground and suffer later. This is just a picture of one of the areas that I planted in my yard. And I've got some shrubs, and I've got all these chicken wire fences around some of the plants that the bunnies love, legumes. So they require some protection. You can see some plants are growing and already flowering. So these are the faster growing plants. And some are really coming up slow and are really small. But I probably needed to actually put more plants in here, honestly.
Do you take your cages off?
Huh?
When the plants get so big then?
Yeah, I do. Once they start blooming, probably 2 years old, I'll take them off. And you know what? The rabbits will mow them down, but once they're established, they're gonna re-sprout. So they should be good by then. And if you have one little native garden, and that's just a salad bar for bunnies, if you convert your whole yard, then there's just too much to eat. So you might not even notice that the bunnies are eating your yard anymore. So that's why you should just plant more. Okay, finally, we're gonna talk about management for a minute. Okay, so I talked about establishment and using mulch. You wanna use a little bit of mulch, just a really light layer around all your plants just to keep the weeds down, but eventually that whole thing is gonna grow in and you don't have to mulch anymore. You want to do smart weeding. You don't have to go in and pull out the purslane, who cares? Or the knotweed, or what's that other really annoying prostrate, naps, that stuff that just grows on the ground. Yeah, it doesn't matter. It's gonna prolifically seed, but once you get that whole garden filled in, it's not gonna get any sunlight on the ground, so those seeds aren't gonna germinate anymore. But if you got Canada thistle, or some other aggressive thistle, or some really aggressive perennial weeds, those you probably want to take care of and take more energy to deal with. When you are cutting weeds, obviously if you have something noxious and you have to treat it with chemicals, that's a whole other story. But if you just want to pull something out of the ground, I actually recommend just cutting it off instead of pulling it out of the ground. Because when you pull something out of the ground, you disturb the soil, you bring up more weed seeds that can then germinate. So cutting the seed heads off actually is a better practice. Get the seed head out of there, and then as long as it's not one of those evil perennials, it doesn't matter if the vegetation is left there. And you might, when you're establishing, have to do some watering. If you're planting little plugs like we sell at our plant sales, Those are pretty small plants, so you wanna, for the first few weeks, you wanna water them, and then after that, if it's drought, then you wanna water them. Otherwise, just let them do their thing. Unless, of course, we're talking about a rain garden. If you're creating a rain garden, then, and it doesn't rain, then you probably wanna, add some water to those garden areas. But otherwise, you really shouldn't have to water that much. So throughout the season, these are the things you have to do. Now, let me take a step back. We are not maintaining our native gardens. We are managing them. We are gardening in our native gardens. Maintenance implies some sort of stasis where everything is staying the same. I'm keeping this plant right here and it's going to be this tall and it's going to behave exactly like this and everything around it is going to stay the same. That is not a native garden. That's not good for the plants. They're just not gonna like it because they're gonna do what they want. That's just how they are. So we're managing our gardens, and this management of these gardens is basically responding to what's happening at any given time. Take a stroll through your garden, you see a weed, you cut its head off, versus going out there and intensively weeding for 2 hours. That's kind of the difference I'm talking about. So in May, you're gonna do garden cleanup. Eventually, you don't wanna do garden cleanup. You shouldn't have to, but early on, you might wanna remove excess stuff from the area, so cut it down to about 8 inches or 12 inches if you wanna leave some nesting stems for stem nesting insects. And then you also wanna, by creating this disturbance, you can actually encourage self-seeding. So if you want things to grow from seed in your garden, you would wanna cut it down. So in May, you just kind of get excited and watch to see what's coming up. And then clean it up if you need to. In May and June, you may have to infill with some new plants. So you may have planted some hoary vervae that only lasted 2 years and now you have the space you need to fill in. So there are plants that require division. So they clump and spread out from a clump versus spreading versus rhizomes. So you can take those plants and you can chop them in half and dig out half of it and go plant that somewhere else. Leave half of the plant behind. You might need to remove or relocate plants. You might figure out that the plant that said it was supposed to be 4 feet tall actually wanted to be 5 feet tall in your garden because it's too fertile. So it doesn't belong there. So you might have to dig plants up and move them or give them to your friends. Diana gets lots of things. Yeah, you might have seedlings that have grown up. I have this a lot. In fact, I sell them with the Lucille wild ones. Plants that I just dig out, prairie spiderwort is a bane of my existence because it spreads by rhizomes, and there's so many of them that I just dig them up and put them in pots, and we sell them for the wild ones plant sales. So, or give them your friends. And in June, you also want to do that Chelsea chop. So I talked about that. That is where you can chop a plant back to, I think they say you want to chop about 1/3 of it down. So the plant's this tall, you want to chop it down to this tall, so it doesn't get as big or say as bushy. Things that respond well to this, milkweeds actually do. Asters, goldenrods. Things that wouldn't respond well to this are coneflowers because they have those individual stems. So anything that kind of branches out is usually going to respond really well to that. And you may decide that I have to have New England aster in my boulevard. New England aster gets 5 feet tall, which putting a 5 foot tall plant in the boulevard is probably not a great idea. But if you want it, you just know you can Chelsea chop it and make it shorter. So there are some things you can do to tall plants to put them in places that they don't belong if you manage them.
You can do that with the question, just went out of my mind. The licorice smelling half.
Anise hyssop.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can chop anise hyssop up all summer long and you will not kill it and it'll still bloom.
Why is it called Chelsea?
It's a practice that came into place from the Chelsea Flower Show in England. So they have this flower show and everybody wants all their plants to be all the same height, so that they started chopping all their plants off so that they would be exactly the right height for the flower show.
Cool.
I had seen them this year, they just got huge and then it just all flattened out. Could that have been chopped off?
Yes.
Because they're more stems, I mean, each individual.
Yeah, but that one actually will respond to that.
I thought about it after it was too big.
As long as you do it before it starts flowering. And even if you do it after, it could potentially do new shoots. But yeah, that's a good one. For sure. Okay, in July and September, you don't have to do anything but keep weeds at bay, keep the perennial mean weeds at bay. Don't worry about the rest of them. And water if there's drought. In late fall, leave your leaves. There was a great webinar on this last fall, right, Pam? Yeah, about garden cleanup in the fall, alternatives to cleanup in the fall. So leave your leaves, cut your stems back to 12 inches. That leaves hollow stems for insects to nest in the following year. So those are good practices, but in the fall, I drive around town and it drives me nuts because I see these gardens with the prairie drop seeds that are just cut back to here, just shaved, scalped off. Insects nest in these things. They lay their eggs in these plants and they overwinter in them. So you don't want to chop those plants back to the ground because there's probably something living in there and should emerge in the spring. So don't cut your garden down. I will be calling the city. Okay, and then in the winter, you don't have to do anything. You just watch the wildlife forage and enjoy the garden because you didn't cut it back. You left food for them. And that's all. I am done now.
What is the difference between the chrome and bulb?
The corm,
Sorry.
they divide differently.
Okay.
Where a corm is like, it's solid and it doesn't have these offshoots. Think of a bulb like an onion or a shallot would be a better example where it grows a bulb and then it'll grow another bulb next to it, whereas a corm is just one big bulb that can be chopped in half.
Okay.
Essentially. I did.
Why don't you mind, go forward one. There you go.
Okay.
So you're winter seeding these for stratification or?
Yep.
So if you did that in the refrigerator, you could just plant seeds?
Yes,
That's what they.
yes. You could just plant seeds now. You can just take
Yeah.
them out and spread them.
But not in May.
Not in May, no. Each native seed has a different requirement. So there's kind of categories. There's nuns and there's cold stratification, and there's scarification. The ones that need 60, 90, 60, 30 days of cold stratification need to be planted in the winter or in the fall in order for them to actually germinate in the spring. You can do the stratification in the fridge using vermiculite in a plastic bag, or I like to use coffee filters versus paper towels. Paper towels stick together. You can just, get that moist and then put your seeds in there, leave them in the fridge for 30, 60, 90 days, then pull them out and plant them. The risk you run by just throwing them out there is the birds could eat them, especially if there's no snow covering the ground. If you get washed away, there's rain. Or you can plant them in milk jugs and then you have plants to plug in the ground later. So now is a great time to get your native seeds. Not too late.
Just the right time.
Yeah, and then I did, just because we were selling seeds, I brought a winter sowing jug that does have plants in it, because I grew this as an example for the workshop we did. But just if somebody wanted to look at that, then we have a webinar on that from February 24.
Couple years ago, anyway.
Yeah. Oh, and also I have a spread books up here, some plant IDs and some of the garden design books that I use. You have questions?
I have a question.
Okay.
So I've got my stalks of my plants still in my garden yet. It's driving me nuts because the winds wreak havoc with everything. How long do I have to let them out there? How warm does it have to be for those bugs, those insects to start moving out of there?
So I've heard a general rule of thumb is 50 degrees, but that's not always the case because there are things that emerge earlier and things that emerge later. So I would wait as long as you can. And really, if you're cutting back stems in the fall, there's nobody nesting in those. You're leaving those for them to be nested in the next season. So it's okay. You can leave them.
I just gotta take my OCD and get it under control.
Yes, yeah, exactly. I've got some grass that's falling over right now and it's driving me insane and I want to go out and cut it. And I'm like, nope, I can't do it. There's there's larvae in here. I just have to leave it alone. Strong.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember the grasses you told me I need to get rid of.
Yeah, you could probably dig them out now.
Well, maybe not.
Well, maybe you can.
Maybe
but
not.
Maybe Darwin can do that for you.
When can I dig out my aster?
Now, do it now and throw it away. Pick a different one.
What kind of mustard?
Aromatic.
Yeah, aromatic
That is way
acid
too
could be.
big for my little spot.
They're supposed to be small and nice, but when you put them in fertile ground, they just- you have that horrible play. But I mean,
Mine
this,
is in fertile ground, so yeah.
yeah, this is a good thing to add to the conversation that, I mean, your site conditions are really gonna influence how your plants grow. And if you have fertile ground, you're gonna be dealing with a whole nother set of problems, like things getting way too big and things being way too healthy, versus if you have terrible ground, then you're gonna be, you know, you shouldn't be struggling because native plants can thrive in the worst stuff. Rocks, there are things that thrive in rocks. So if you have bad site conditions, your plants should behave better. But if you have nice soil, you might want to pick things that aren't aggressive and are well behaved.
I just have a question to the group. I have a cross-pollinated spaghetti squash that I'm wondering if anybody would be willing to plant the seeds to see what happens to. I don't have a garden and I don't have the space to do that, but if anybody would like to try test, just talk to me afterwards.
Okay, well, thanks everybody for coming.
Good job.